McKenzie Milton, an electrifying dual-threat quarterback who led the Golden Knights of Central Florida out of the ashes of an 0-12 season back in 2015 to an epic 25-game win streak. Just as McKenzie Milton and the Central Florida Golden Knights were on the verge of making history by posting consecutive undefeated seasons and making a legitimate push for the college football playoff, tragedy struck. This sudden and devastating turn of events would not only change the life and career of McKenzie Milton, but the entire trajectory of the Central Florida program as a whole. So in today's video, we're going to cover the career of McKenzie Milton and his meteoric rise as one of the top dual-threat quarterbacks in all of college football, and the aftermath after his sudden and tragic end to his epic run at Central Florida. So if you like this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe. So without further delay, we're going to jump right into today's topic. McKenzie Milton is a native of Mililani, Hawaii, right outside of Honolulu. During his time at Mililani High School, he was an all-state dual-threat quarterback, passing for over 2,500 yards with 30 touchdowns. After leading his team to an 11-win season during his senior year, he was ranked as the 8th overall recruit in the state, and he was ranked 358th nationally. Although his national ranking was low, you have to note that in this particular quarterback recruiting class, it included Jalen Hurts, Malik Henry, Justin Herbert, and the late Dwayne Haskins. Milton was one of the top recruits out of the state of Hawaii, and he had offers from the Air Force Academy and the University of Hawaii. Ultimately, Milton chose to play football under Scott Frost at Central Florida. And in high school, he idolized the former Oregon standout and Heisman winner Marcus Mariota. Scott Frost was a dual-threat quarterback at Nebraska, and he was Marcus Mariota's offensive coordinator during his epic Heisman run at Oregon. Milton believed that the newly hired head coach in Scott Frost had the ability to maximize his potential as a dual-threat quarterback. Therefore, he chose Central Florida because it would be a good fit. As Milton arrived to Central Florida as a freshman, that program was an absolute shambles. Just 2 seasons prior, former quarterback standout Blake Bortles led the Golden Knights to a Fiesta Bowl victory, finishing that season 11-1 in 2013. Central Florida's 2015 season was described as nothing short as pain and misery, as they failed to win a single game, going 0-12. As the program wiped the slate clean, replacing George O'Leary with Scott Frost and revamping the entire roster, McKenzie Milton was able to win the starting job as a freshman. And as a freshman, he posted a modest 2,000 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, and they finished that season with a 6-6 record. Even though statistically McKenzie Milton had a below-average season statistically, finishing the year 6-6 with a completely new roster and coaching staff after losing 12 straight in the previous season, that's an achievement within itself. With very close losses to Maryland in double overtime and a 1-point loss to Temple, that 2016 campaign with a starting freshman quarterback, Central Florida could have easily gone 8-4 after that abysmal 12-loss season the year prior. After the initial growing pains of that 2016 season, the Central Florida Golden Knights, led by McKenzie Milton, were poised to make college football history and challenge a flawed system that was the college football playoff selection process. Stepping into that 2017 season, Central Florida blew away their opponents, winning their first 3 games by a total of 139-40. They were dominant on both sides of the ball, and McKenzie Milton led their offense with a total of 4,000 passing yards and 38 touchdowns, with only 8 interceptions. And if those numbers were not impressive enough, Milton rushed for an additional 600 yards and 8 touchdowns. Central Florida did not have one close game all season, with the exception of a double overtime 62-55 shootout, as they overcame the Memphis Tigers to win the conference championship. As Central Florida stood 12-0, they were shamefully overlooked by the playoff committee in favor of blue blood programs such as Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and Oklahoma. Now granted, those teams had strong arguments, and Georgia and Oklahoma gave us one of the most thrilling overtime games in Rose Bowl history. Yet, this left McKenzie Milton and the Golden Knights with an invite to the Peach Bowl against the Auburn Tigers as a consolation prize. Several teams in this situation would have pouted, sulked, and complained, and they would have given a lackluster performance as they were left out of the national championship picture. However, Central Florida put on a spectacular performance as McKenzie Milton threw for 240 yards, rushed for 116 with a total of 3 touchdowns. And defensive captain Shaquem Griffin, despite being an amputee missing his left hand, terrorized quarterback Jarrett Stidham and the Auburn offense with 12 tackles and 2 sacks. And the Central Florida Golden Knights won the Peach Bowl 34-27, capping off a 13-0 season. With that triumphant win over the Auburn Tigers, the Central Florida Golden Knights had just completed one of the most epic and biggest turnarounds in the history of college football. And as the only undefeated team for the 2017 season, they claimed themselves as national champions. Now granted, this is a controversial take and is up for debate, as clearly the University of Alabama defeated Georgia in a thrilling overtime victory, as Tua Tagovailoa splashed onto the college football scene and connected with Devonta Smith, winning the game in dramatic fashion against the Georgia Bulldogs, not only winning the national championship, but finishing that season 14-1. I know what you might be thinking. What does it take for a team in Central Florida's position as a mid-major Group of 5 program to make it to the college football playoff? And the short answer to that is that it would take a miracle. Now I want to know, prior to the 2024 season, only 4 teams participated in the college football playoff, as opposed to the current format of 12 teams. The most accurate and realistic answer in a 4-team playoff scenario is that a team in Central Florida's position would have to go undefeated in consecutive seasons. This would give the playoff committee no administrative, mythical, logical, emotional, or even spiritual reason to leave them out of the playoff. And if I left out any additional adjectives, drop those in the comment section below. As you might be able to come to this conclusion, it's very difficult for any program to go undefeated, but to do it in consecutive seasons, that's nearly impossible, or so you would think. As McKenzie Milton and the Golden Knights of Central Florida were poised to take on that 2018 schedule, they would have to do it without their head coach Scott Frost, who in a shocking move left the program for the Nebraska job. Who in their right mind would leave after engineering one of the biggest rags to riches story in the history of college football? To be fair, Coach Frost was born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he was a dual-threat option quarterback for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. As Missouri offensive coordinator and former Oklahoma standout Josh Heupel, he would take over at Central Florida, and he would have extremely large shoes to fill. Despite that sudden and unexpected coaching change, the Golden Knights of Central Florida would pick up where they left off. They obliterated the competition, scoring a whopping 243 points over the span of their first 5 games. And as they lit up the scoreboard while simultaneously playing solid on defense, the Knights were 10-0 going into the final game of the regular season against their rivals, the South Florida Bulls. Although the Central Florida Golden Knights were a 2-touchdown favorite over the South Florida Bulls, unknowingly, a tragic sequence of events were about to occur that would not only change the life and career of McKenzie Milton, but the entire Central Florida program as a whole. Early in the second quarter, it was 3rd down and 7, and McKenzie Milton was rolling out to the right to evade pressure as the pocket collapsed in order to get first down yardage. As he was brought down by 2 South Florida defenders, his knee twisted awkwardly, and it dislocated in the most gruesome fashion imaginable. The severity of his injury was immediate, as both players and coaches from each team looked on in horror as they saw Milton lying on the turf, holding his severely injured leg. The athletic training staff of both South and Central Florida immediately came to his aid, and he was rushed to a nearby hospital. It didn't take years of medical training to see that he had dislocated his knee. However, unknowingly, McKenzie Milton was in a race against time, as this particular injury resulted in severing multiple veins and arteries within his leg, threatening the overall blood supply to that particular limb. This particular injury could have potentially led to a syndrome called avascular necrosis. Due to the lack of blood flow after severing those arteries and veins, this can affect the overall integrity of the joint, and in the most extreme cases, it can lead to amputation. Milton's future was in jeopardy, and his overall chances of making a full recovery were grim. As freshman quarterback Darrell Mack took over for their injured star player, they were able to close out South Florida, and they edged Memphis in order to win the conference championship. As Central Florida finished yet again undefeated prior to the playoff selection show, they were once again overlooked in favor of the usual suspects of Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. Imagine winning 25 straight games and being left out of the playoff in back-to-back seasons. Yet, however, in this case, I do understand to some degree. Even though Darrell Mack had potential, as a freshman quarterback with only 1 start under his belt, this wasn't going to convince the playoff committee that Central Florida would be competitive amongst the elite in college football. As Notre Dame was obliterated 30-3 by Clemson, and as per usual, the Alabama Crimson Tide dominated Oklahoma in the semifinals, I truly think that Central Florida with a healthy McKenzie Milton would have been more of a viable opponent and possibly led to a dramatic upset, disrupting the college football status quo. As Central Florida would go on to lose to LSU in the Fiesta Bowl, mostly attributed to the lackluster play of Darrell Mack, and LSU led by quarterback Joe Burrow, and one of the most stacked rosters in college football history, would go on to win the national championship for the upcoming 2019-2020 season. Milton's injury would require multiple surgeries over a 2-year span in order to maintain the vasculature in his leg and to maintain proper blood flow. After 2 years of multiple surgeries and brutal physical therapy sessions, he was cleared to play football and return to the game that he loved the most. With his 2-year hiatus from the game of football rehabbing, Central Florida had a promising freshman quarterback from the state of Hawaii by the name of Dillon Gabriel, who closely mirrored McKenzie Milton's skill set. Making the difficult choice, he saw the writing on the wall, that Dillon Gabriel was the quarterback of the future for the Golden Knights, and McKenzie Milton entered the transfer portal to compete for the starting job at Florida State University. The Florida State Seminoles were in the midst of rebuilding a program, and they had many gaps to fill, including at quarterback. Although it was even a miracle that McKenzie Milton saw the fill of that gruesome injury 2 years prior. His time at Florida State was overall lackluster, and it was obvious he was never completely the same dual-threat quarterback prior to that devastating injury. With only 6 starts under his belt and being on the wrong end of the program's worst upset in history against the Jacksonville State Gamecocks, which I cover in another video, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. It was obvious that he was not the same player while at Central Florida. He eventually was benched in favor of Jordan Travis, who would go on to lead the Seminoles to an undefeated regular season in 2023. Yet in a tragic sequence of events, he would endure the same fate, suffering a career-ending injury, ruining Florida State's chances at winning a national championship. At the end of his senior year, McKenzie Milton participated in the Hula Bowl All-Star Game, which was held in Orlando, Florida, at Central Florida's home stadium, which came full circle from his tumultuous journey. He wore a dual helmet with the logo of both Central Florida and Florida State University to honor both teams and his journey as a whole. Milton was undrafted and he chose to retire from football in 2022. And after his retirement, he uses his knowledge and experience to mentor young quarterbacks, as he is currently the quarterbacks coach at his alma mater, Central Florida, under his former coach Scott Frost, who returned back to the Golden Knights after his unsuccessful stint at Nebraska. What were your thoughts on the incredible journey of McKenzie Milton? This is definitely a story of what could have been, and I want to wish McKenzie Milton the best as he enters this new phase in his life in his career as a college coach. Do you think that the Central Florida Golden Knights would have been selected to the college football playoff if McKenzie Milton were able to remain healthy? Also, do you think it's fair that injuries sway the opinion of the college football playoff selection committee? I want to hear your thoughts about that particular subject in the comment section below. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video just as much as I enjoyed making it for you. And if you found value in this particular video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. And by subscribing, you will never miss an episode of College Football Legends. Until next time.